Hi everybody, it's me. I just thought I would do a little excerpt out of Standing in the Eye of the Storm this evening. It's getting pretty late here, going on about 10:30 in the evening. Just thought I'd share with you a couple of things. If you go online and you find my books, you're going to find one cover that looks like this. There you go. Now this one is no longer in print. It is through a different publisher. There we go. And it's no longer in print, but you can find it under the same title. And it is under Titan Publishing now. And there's what the cover looks like. Get it in the camera there. There we go. And since I had already put a few chapters of Stilling the Thunder on, this is the first book in the series. I called it the Life Storm series, although some people have written it down as the Teresa Arrowood collection. You can find it on several online stores. The main one is on Amazon.com. Just thought I'd share with you a little bit about the story. The story is about this young couple that actually ran into each other by accident. She is a emergency room trauma nurse, and he is a homicide detective. The story takes place in Portland, Maine. In their younger days, they were abused. The main character in the story, the male character in the story, was abused as a child in a foster home. Now, not to say that every foster home is a horrible setting, but for him, it was quite horrendous, and he was there to protect his younger sister, and he took a lot of abusive situations on himself because he wanted to protect her. The female character in the book, the abuse started when she was 16 years old. Without giving too much away, she was abused by what they thought was a stranger at the time, and they ended up meeting each other as young adults. Although now that they haven't put those things together, it will be brought out later in the story. But just to let you in on a little bit of what's going on in the book, this is the first chapter, and you can find a few pages of the first chapter on Amazon.com on the look or peek or whatever you want to call it inside. But this is Standing in the Eye of the Storm, and it is the first book in the series. Chapter 1. I didn't know it, but today was about to be the changing point in my life. I guess if you looked at it, I was treading water and eventually would come up to take a gulp of air on occasion. At the age of 21, I thought my life was set, having the same thoughts as any other person at that time of my life, of having a husband and family. I had my own career, and I'd really pushed for it. Being an only child, I felt that I needed to excel in whatever I did. None of my father's side of the family had more than a high school education, and there were few of the nieces and nephews that went on to college. My mother's side was about the same, although her side of the family was smaller. Small towns at that time of life spent most of their time on making a living than education, especially when the families were large. I stood at the window gazing out onto my front lawn, mostly thinking of having to come home after my shift to clean house. But Lily had asked for me to meet her after work. Oh, the things she had gotten me into. Blind dates were often her forte, and she always felt that I had to have a man in my life. Ryan was the last one, and that had been approximately 1 year ago. We had tried to make a go of it, but there was just so many roadblocks, we just couldn't make a connection. I had known him for a long time, going to school with him for more than 6 years. It was closing in on 2 in the afternoon, and I was due to start my shift at 3. I sure wasn't looking forward to it. At least I was going to be meeting Lily after work, which was not typical, but it was better than going home to an empty apartment. Walking on the ward, I was greeted quickly with a ready smile from Carol, the hospital's clerk, and my right hand at times. "Hello, Bella. Ready for an exciting night in the never-ending soap opera of trauma?" She gave a smirk and a bit of sarcasm. I looked at her equally as thrilled. It never ceases to amaze me how people can manage to inflict pain on themselves, or from the aid of others. I turned to go into Trauma 1, and she stopped me abruptly, stepping in front of me. I looked at her bewildered. "Bella, you really don't want to take that patient. You want to take care of Trauma 2. Marilyn has Trauma 1. "Okay, I'll bite. Why do I want to take care of Trauma 2? I looked at her now with a downturned look as if I was trying to look through her. "Marilyn started Trauma 1, but believe me, she missed the boat and did you a tremendous favor." She said this with a light in her eyes and a sheepish grin. I started to feel a cold and forgiving tremor through me. What had they set me up for this time? I cocked my head to the side and looked at her warily. "Okay, Carol. What are you and the rest of the team set me up on this time?" Carol looked at me and shook her head. "Oh, Bella, no setup, just dumb luck on your part." "Wish I had such luck." "I mean, as patients go, you hit the jackpot." "Okay, now you have me scared." I pushed my hair behind my ears and threw my stethoscope around my neck, preparing for battle. "Bella, no kidding, you have the best of the best. You have Carter Blake, the most eligible bachelor that I know of in this area of the country." She started to flush, and the smile on her face was from ear to ear. It almost looked painful. I lifted an eyebrow to comment, and I felt my face contort to a small grin. "You mean the Carter Blake? The die for a date never seen with anyone, Carter Blake?" "That's the one, Bella. Maybe you're the one to meld him." She fanned herself as if she was going to faint, reminding me of Scarlett O'Hara. "Come on, Carol. If this is for sure him, why would you think that? I mean, he must have women everywhere. He's no lack of looks by any means. And I really do not need to be set up." "Bella, don't look at it like that. Besides, if I had the chance, I'd take it. He's gorgeous, not to mention he's filthy rich." "His father is filthy rich. From what I've heard, he doesn't have much to do with his father's company." "I bet he does. Guys like that don't just give up and leave the family fortune. If they do, they're nuts." "Well, I better get started or I'll never get out of here tonight." Carol gave me a wink and started to turn back to her desk. "Maybe you won't want to once you meet him." I walked into Trauma 2 cautiously. Dr. Reed met me with a very blank appearance, one that didn't give an ounce of information away. He was stern and decisive in his look. His eyes were dark and without emotion. He handed me the Mac as we stood at the foot of Blake's bed. He looked as though he was totally drained of his thoughts and had no more drive in him. "Isabella, I want you to stay with him for a while. It's not likely that there will be further complications. For sure he has a concussion. The first 24 hours will be the telltale of Mr. Blake. The car he was driving was pretty banged up. Lucky for him, he had his seatbelt on, or it would have been much worse. He could have gone through the windshield. As it is, he still hit the windshield pretty hard. The airbag did not deploy. I look for him to have a pretty bad headache when he awakes. He also hit the steering wheel. You might want to watch his heart a little closer. Nothing showing now, but you never know. I would rather watch for problems as not." I started to look through the chart, taking a deep breath, then looking to Dr. Reed questionably. "So what caused the accident?" Dr. Reed gave me a rather quizzical look and appeared to be sorting out facts to himself. "Well, We aren't sure. The police report seems to guide to the road conditions and the fact that speed may have been a factor. We aren't really sure. He hit a tree taking a curve too quickly. It's a wonder he's alive. So far, there doesn't appear to be any major injuries, but we will know more when he wakes up. Just stay with him. I'll see that he is the only one you have for now." Dr. Reed turned and walked from the room slowly after looking at Carter Blake and the heart monitor in which he was now attached. I shrugged and thought to myself, this is going to be a long night. Walking closer up to the head of the bed, I saw that he most certainly had taken a beating. His eyes were closed, red and swollen, his face covered with dirt and multiple cuts and scratches. He still had traces of glass in his dark, unruly hair, and the cloth tape on his forehead where the ambulance had secured him to a backboard. I quickly assessed him, looking at the heart monitor, determining that his rhythm and rate were good, and blood pressure was on the low side. Not altogether a bad sign. It depended on what was normal for him and what the accident might have done to him. He felt cool to touch. Walking over to the blanket warmer, I heard a few words uttered, turning around. He was lying very still, while his eyes remained closed. The words spoken were not comprehensible. So I continued with my duties and placed a blanket over him. To get a better view of his cuts and scratches, I got a washcloth and washed his face gently. They didn't appear to be too bad, but the one over his right eye wanted to bleed, so I quickly tended to it. Looking to his chest, there didn't appear to be any cuts, but there were some red marks from the seat belt. I was sure it would eventually leave a large bruise. It took me at least a half an hour to clean up all the trash and dirt from around him. I could now see his face. He was very handsome indeed. Carol wasn't kidding. His eyelashes should have belonged to a girl. They were long and fanned out against his cheek, now bruised and red. He almost had the face of a child, innocence, if you will. My thoughts drifted on me. You must have someone somewhere that is worried about you. Starting to speak to him, I knew from what I had been taught that no matter how far out you might think your patients are, it is proven that they can hear you. Reaching down, I took his hand and clasped it in mine. There was never a stir from him. His hands were warm against mine. On examining them, there were no cuts, scrapes, or bruising. He did have an indentation on his ring finger, reflecting the presence of a past ring or wedding band that was no longer there. "Mr. Blake, can you hear me? I'm Isabella, your nurse. You're in Northdale Trauma Medical Center. You had a car accident earlier this evening. If you can hear me, I want you to squeeze my hand." I waited patiently for his response, but none came, so I tried another approach. "Carter, I'm Isabella, your nurse. You had an accident earlier, but you're safe now. Can you squeeze my hand?" I waited, and finally I felt a little twitch from his fingers. "It's okay. Carter, you're fine. I'm going to be with you. I'm not leaving. I'll be watching you. Just rest for now." Breathing a sigh of relief, I hadn't noticed that I had been holding my breath all this time. I started to take my hand away, and he gripped it enough for me to know not to leave him, and a strange, sinking feeling filled me when I saw a lone tear slide down the side of his face. I sat down on the stool beside him and wiped his cheek. I left my hand in his in assurance that I was not leaving him. Marilyn Strike, one of the Maine trauma nurses that pretty much got what she wanted, walked into Trauma 2 and made her crude remark, slithering in as she approached me. How this woman ever became a nurse was beyond me. She had no compassion and absolutely had no tact. She spoke with venom most of the time. She was slender and sinfully beautiful, with her auburn hair and jade-colored eyes. Having the build of any man's dream, she could have had anyone she wanted, and most often did whatever she had to get them. So, you won the lottery tonight. You better enjoy it while you can. Too bad he came in after they brought me a patient, or I would have had him. Maybe I will ask for reassignment. She stared daggers through me. Tilting my head to the side, I looked at her sternly. Marilyn, don't you have work to do? Yes, but I would much rather hang out with Mr. Blake. You know, Isabella, I pretty much get what I want, and when I want it. Looking at her, my look became frosted. Marilyn, don't you have a broom you're going to miss? She curled a lip and started to turn away, but stopped. Sticks and stones, honey. Just remember, I always get what I want. She walked off easily, and I took a deep breath, hoping that she would not appear for the rest of the night. But then again, it's almost too good to be true. I looked at the clock, and it was 9 in the evening. It had been a long night. Bringing my chair closer to the bed, I placed the Mac in my lap to look at the reports and the description of the accident. We still didn't have a contact number for family, and I started to look through some of the things he had with him and found a number with a girl's name on it. It's the only number I had to a family or friend, so I decided to take a shot and hope that it was someone that was in some kinship to him. Dialing the phone, I soon heard it ring, and then I heard a distressed voice on the other end. Hello? The voice was shaky and small. Hello, this is Isabella at Northdale University Hospital, and is this Beth Andrews? The voice was hesitant and cracking with a small, held-back sob. This is Beth Andrews, she squeaked. I approached this cautiously as I could. It wasn't easy when you didn't know the person on the other end. Beth, this is Isabella. I'm a nurse at Northdale Trauma Medical Center. Would you by any chance know a Mr. Carter Blake? She answered quickly. Oh, my God, that's my brother. Is he okay? What happened to him? Her voice was shaking, and she began to cry. Beth, I have Carter here with me. I'm taking care of him. He was in a car accident earlier this evening. I'm sorry no one had contacted you. I just found this number among his belongings and took a shot someone would know where to find his family. Oh, please take care of him. He's all the family I have. She hesitated, and I heard a sniffle on the other end. He was probably trying to get to me. Please tell him I'm okay, that I'm with Molly. He's awake, isn't he? I choked and began to talk to Beth again, hoping to calm her, but I didn't know how she would handle just finding out her brother had been in a major car accident. Beth, Carter has been in a pretty bad collision. He hit a tree. The doctor has been in to see him and says he sees no problem right now, but he is unconscious and has a concussion as a result of hitting the windshield. We will know more when he awakens. Can I see him? I don't see any reason that you can't, but he isn't awake to talk. He does respond, so that's a good sign. Tell him I'm coming, and we'll be there as soon as I can. Oh, tell him I'm okay and that I love him. I assured Beth that I would tell her brother, and hung up the phone. Stepping back to Carter, I took his hand again and looked at his face and spoke softly to him. Carter, it's Isabella. I just got in touch with Beth. She said to tell you she was okay. She's with Molly. She will be here to see you soon. Don't worry, she's fine. She said to tell you she loves you. He tried to open his eyes, but he just couldn't seem to manage it. He grasped my hand with his and gave it a little squeeze. Leaning in, I pushed the hair away from his eyes. His skin was starting to warm, and he felt velvet soft. My heart sank to my feet. I didn't understand this feeling. It was foreign to me. Swallowing hard, I left my fingertips lightly against his temple. I felt eyes on me, and I never turned to see who it was, hearing footsteps as they clicked against the tile floor. Isabella, are you going to take a break? Carol's voice was behind me, and I tried to regain a little of my composure. I delayed in my answer as I looked at his face and studied it so that it was ingrained into my brain. Isabella, are you okay? I felt my breath as it stuck in my throat, and I didn't move or turn to Carol to speak. No, I think I'm going to stick around a while. I heard Carol shift behind me, and I managed to get out a few more words to her. Carol, do me a favor and call Lily. Tell her I can't make it. I'll call her tomorrow. I finally managed to turn to her, and she looked at me in alarm. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine. I lifted my fingers to my lips, being unsure of my own reaction. I felt like I had known this man all my life. It sent shivers through me. It was unnerving. I got this unbelievable pull, and I knew I couldn't leave him. Turning back to him, I placed my hand in his, rubbing the top of it gently. I felt his hand relax in the touch of mine. Oh, I see. Carol stilled momentarily. It's almost quitting time. Do you want me to stay with him until you change? I continued to gaze at him. No. I think I will just stay here with him. Okay. I'll talk to you later. Sure, I answered, almost silently. I sat down next to him and held his hand in mine. I sat silently by him, a stranger, listening to the hypnotic sound of the heart monitor. I thought back to the time when I really thought there was such a thing as love at first sight, which had long dissipated. Now I wasn't sure. Why was I so enraptured by him? I awoke to find my head lying on his hand, my hand still clasping his. The light from the early day cast a shadow over the sheets, and I slowly raised my head and looked up at him. His face was unstressed and calm, his lips slightly parted, his eyes closed, and his lashes fanned over his cheeks. He looked so peaceful. I stood and walked to the window and looked out onto the new day, seeing people quickly going here and there, cars trying to get away from the rush. I wondered what was so important that they were in such a hurry. I was soon startled by the footsteps entering in the room. And that's where we'll stop for now. I'll continue in the first chapter on another day. Thanks, guys. Enjoy.